Joining us again this week over Zoom, working journalists from across the state. These folks work tirelessly every day to bring you the news, and we thank them for taking time out of their busy day to help us reflect on another historic year. First up from the Albuquerque Journal Capitol Bureau, we welcome back Dan McKay. Also with us is Jessica Unsuras. She's the news director at the Carlsbad Current-Argus. And we welcome back Algernon Damasa from the Las Cruces Sun News. Rounding out our virtual roundtable is our friend Julianne Grimm, editor and publisher of the Santa Fe Reporter. Our number 5 story of 2021 is still a work in progress as we record this segment. We're talking about the once-a-decade exercise in redistricting. New Mexico lawmakers changed the redistricting process this year to try and take politics out of the equation. And Dan, do you think it has been successful given how the special session has played out so far as we're taping this?
I've actually been thinking about that. The whole session is to sort of see how much of the redistricting principles that came, the concepts that came out of the Citizen Redistricting Committee, which was a panel that could not consider partisan data and also de-emphasize incumbent addresses in its work, how much of their work ends up surviving the session. And that is one of the debates that's playing out right now. There's been kind of a deadlock on the Senate side for some legislative seats with Native American Pueblo governors, tribal government representatives at odds with a plan that would protect some incumbents and shore up a few folks' political support in their districts. So I think the answer is to be determined.
Right. Yeah, good point. Algernon, representation was a big issue from the beginning. Critics of the new CRC pointed to a lack of rural and Native American representation. Both of those issues have carried through during the legislative debates so far. So did the process overcome those concerns or not?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to learn about that. And there's different conversations to be had. Are we talking about our congressional district or are we talking about local legislative districts? There's a very interesting shape emerging to the congressional district, the 2nd congressional district of New Mexico, which for a long time has encompassed just the bottom square of southern New Mexico and a little bit of Bernalillo County. I think it becomes very interesting. That district presents a lot of challenges for a candidate to appeal not only to various ethnographies and including Native American communities, but also somebody who can speak to people from the agricultural rural districts, as well as the oil and gas production sector of the Southeast. And based on what the district might end up looking like, a lot more voters from around the Albuquerque metro region. I think that for any candidate of either of our dominant parties, that presents some unique challenges. And as far as the local legislative districts, we're still waiting to see how that starts to look.
Good point there. Jessica, the original bill to change this process would have given the commission the ability to select the final maps. But some lawmakers said that was unconstitutional and that lawmakers had to have a say and be able to amend the proposals. But isn't that the only way to truly take politics out of this once-in-a-decade process?
I would agree with you and say, yeah, that is the only way to truly eliminate politics from this process. But they did have a point. This is a process written into our Constitution as belonging to our legislative body. And so they are undertaking that work now. And I think that, just to echo what Dan said, that we are seeing what is happening in this special session reintroduce some of those political issues straight back into the process. So all of the good work that was done by the committee beforehand might just be lost in what is happening in Santa Fe.
Julianne, as we've mentioned, lawmakers are still hashing this out at the time of this taping. And there's always a chance the final maps get vetoed by Governor Lujan Grisham or there is a court challenge. But as things stand right now, how do you think redistricting will impact next year's midterm elections?
I mean, it's, you asked me the similar question for last week's show that we taped just a few minutes ago. That's and I'll kind of repeat what I said, which is that like Dan mentioned, the redistricting committee wasn't supposed to take into account partisan information, but we see that these maps that are coming out of the Roundhouse have been changed in some cases significantly, in some cases in kind of more minor ways, but some of the considerations that are being made have to do with performance in a future election. And so one of the interesting things for Santa Fe, it has to do with Congressional District 3, which is Algernon pointed out is the companion. It was the northern block of the state. But now the maps that have headed to the governor for signature, they really divide the state on this sort of bias lines. And so you've got Santa Fe and Rio Arriba County are actually in the same congressional district as part of the city of Hobbs.
Yeah.
And so, trying to find a candidate who can gather votes from both of those parts of the state, I think, could really introduce an interesting, kind of candidate that we've never seen. I think that, too, you heard some discussion when particularly folks from from CD2 were saying, you can't put us into CD3. That's just crazy. You have other people from the north saying, are we going to have an oil man representing us? So I think it's really the voters are going to determine that.
You've set up my next question to Dan just beautifully. Dan, your newspaper, the Albuquerque Journal, had a very thought-provoking editorial about this redistricting process, and your paper is advocating for the governor to, in fact, not accept these maps because, as Julianne mentioned, there's the potential that the more urban-based candidates just won't have a feel for the rural parts of their state, and that the power will just slowly over time just go right back to the urban centers. I really encourage folks to check out this editorial, but do pick up on that, where your folks were coming from and how this process might turn next.
Well, I should first say I'm not involved in the opinion side of the newspaper, but yeah, there's definitely a potential where you could have an Albuquerque congressperson representing Southwest New Mexico and Hobbs and Las Cruces. You could, if somebody emerged out of Rio Rancho, you could have candidates. You could have all three Congress people be concentrated in the metropolitan area.
Right.
The reverse is also true. You could end up with, maybe there's a strong candidate from Lee County in the oil patch, and in a presidential midterm election where Republicans are expected to make gains in Congress. Perhaps you end up with with an oil executive representing Santa Fe. There are all kinds of interesting potential dynamics, and it looks to me like all three seats, if this stands, will be more competitive. Rather than having two safe Democratic seats and a relatively safe Republican seat, you're probably going to end up with more competitive races all around.
Jessica, real quick, if CD3, what's been the scuttle down there? Because when you look at the map that's proposed now, wow, it's a very different district than we've been used to forever.
Right. So no, I think to echo what Dan was saying, we are really interested in this idea of a more competitive race, right? Are we going to be seeing that diversity come to this part of our region? But I think probably the larger conversation is, in reality, how based in reality is it to think that we will have a person from southern New Mexico represented or be elected to represent us in that seat. I think we see it as a power move, a way to dilute a conservative portion of the state. And I think a lot of people here will tell you that they are truly, truly concerned that they will end up being ignored by whoever is duly elected to that seat if they come from a more metro area.
Good stuff there. We'll stay with the legislature for our number 4 story of 2021. It was years in the making and took a special session, but state lawmakers did legalize recreational use cannabis this year. It's been a frantic race to get the industry up and running by April of next year. Julianne, were you surprised that it got done in 2021? Just a simple question.
No, I mean, I actually expected it to happen the session before and was, kind of lost a bet on that one. I think that, it was high time, as people say, for New Mexico to do this, especially considering what our neighbors have done and the position that we have in the industry with our longstanding medical program. I think what's really crazy though right now is what's happening on the local level as these local jurisdictions take what little control the state has left for them and they make decisions about zoning. We've got new news out of Bernalillo County that they don't want anybody to smoke cannabis outside. And you may remember my being incredulous on this program previously when Santa Fe County said they didn't want anybody to grow cannabis outside. I'm not really sure what these local lawmakers, think they're accomplishing by sending everything inside, especially in a place like New Mexico where people so value being outside. But, Santa Fe County did the same thing with respect to the consumption areas that Bernalillo County did, which is, you're a retailer, you want to allow people to enjoy your product, you have to build a room and they have to do it under a roof. And I don't know if that will really persist over time, but right now we're really seeing this patchwork.
Interesting points there. Algernon, are we rushing things in terms of the rollout though? Licenses are taking a while to be issued and time is running short for manufacturers to have plants in the ground and producing flowers in time to have product on the shelves by next spring.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge is that the legislative deadlines put things on a very tight time clock as far as having a rulemaking process that really allows for public input. And I think honestly, as has been acknowledged from Santa Fe and throughout the industry, is we'll have to go back to the legislation and we'll have to go back to the rulemaking and make adjustments as reality sets in. And also and the conditions are going to be different in different parts of the state. I mean, Julianne talked about how some local bodies are saying we don't want people growing cannabis outdoors. Well, in Doña Ana County and Luna County, growing it outdoors is not even really a practical option because of the winds that we have down here. And so that forces production into greenhouses and structures that have to be built and they have to be secured and maintained. And I think that there's just a lot of unknowns. And so at the same time that we have to work really fast to get everything in place, get seeds into the ground, and get things ready by the statutory deadlines so that the marketplace opens with options, inevitably, we're going to have to go back and make adjustments.
No doubt about it. Even lawmakers themselves were saying that's a possibility in real time. They were saying it back then. Jessica, still a fair amount of concern that this is an industry that's accessible to all New Mexicans, meaning what's the sense or the excitement level in southeastern New Mexico? Can folks afford to get in the game, as Algernon just sort of pointed out?
Well, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people here talking about what they would need to, trying to better understand the rules to see what they would need to do to get in the game, as you say. But I also think that there is still a lot of, as Algernon put it, a lot of questions about what that means, right? We were talking to a development group here in Eddy County earlier, and they go in and they build these metal buildings. And they said that they are seeing a lot of people come to them and ask, what would it take to build a greenhouse for me? Like, what kind of investment are we talking about here? So there are definitely a lot of inquiries being made, not only on the practicality of facilities, but also we're seeing a lot of our really small, what we call security groups in this region, get a lot of inquiries too about what would it take to secure a facility if we decide to go into this business.
Interesting. I would not have thought of that. That's interesting. Dan McKay, what's the bump here for New Mexico as a state? You know, as the state's agricultural center, are people seeing lots of opportunity on the horizon?
You know, I don't know that it's going to be necessarily a huge revenue source for the state, so much in terms of actual revenue, so much as it's an attempt to diversify the economy and add some different agricultural opportunities. I think, you know, as the other panelists have touched on, you know, there is definitely a challenge in access and, you know, how many people really have the startup money, the capital to enter the business, I think is still a question.
Julianne, I got to ask you this. I got to wonder sometimes, during this whole process, did we miss a window on the amount of money that we could have potentially pulled in for tax revenue here? I mean, Arizona legalized, of course, Colorado beat us by years, but Texas doesn't look like it's going to move in that direction. Looking at the regional map, where does New Mexico sit in your mind?
Well, Texas really seems happy to send people over the border to New Mexico for whatever it is that they don't want to deal with in their state. Some of my family's from Texas. I got no problem really with Texans, but we're definitely going to see some crossing the border tourism, cannabis tourism that they call, consumer purchases going on. I think there's a lot of people today who are driving through New Mexico up to Colorado from Texas to make those kinds of purchases. And so, all the economic forecasts that were used during the legislative session in the last couple when they were really debating this, they allocated some portion of the revenue that we could expect as a state to be coming from this tourism idea. And we know that, people come to New Mexico again for a variety of reasons. And I think there's definitely an advocacy group that says, let's bring people here for cannabis. I think though, above and beyond that, New Mexicans are using cannabis. And New Mexicans buy a lot of alcohol, and New Mexicans are going to buy a lot of cannabis. I don't think there's any dispute about that, in so much as there's going to be cannabis for New Mexicans to purchase, given what some of the other panelists touched on. We've heard from the director, the superintendent of the RLD, that they fully expect there to be a supply shortage. And so that's what we can look forward to. And I think, again, you're going to see the local jurisdictions try to take advantage of their taxing authority, try to put the cannabis revenue, that new gross receipts tax revenue, to specific purposes in their community. So we'll see what happens.
Good point there. Dan, I got to ask you, is there any, the economic revenue projections, I remember just a few years ago, it was like 200 million, 250, then suddenly it was, half that, now it was like 50 million, something like that. What happens if we don't get a significant bounce? What happens to the idea of legalized marijuana?
Yeah, I don't think we know the answer to that. That is a good question. I mean, these revenue forecasts really have bounced around a lot. And as you mentioned, I feel like the early estimates were much more substantial than the more recent estimates. It seems like they keep coming down, and it could just be that economists are trying to be conservative, or it could be the question you asked earlier about did we miss the boat, and now so many other places have legalized that we won't have as much of the market. There's a lot to be determined by about this, and we'll see. And as we talked earlier, local policymakers are adding restrictions
That's right.
that may make the industry a little more difficult to thrive.
As Algernon mentioned earlier, we're going to revisit all of this down the road. There's no question. We're just getting started with our countdown of the top 5 stories of 2021. But before we learn what number 3 is, let's pause for some thoughts on climate change and its impacts here in New Mexico. We reached out to several individuals to get some personal reflections as we head into a new year. First up, ecologist and UNM professor Matthew Hurto. We'll hear from him.